Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts Podcast. At the Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 44. For episode 44, I wanted to start off with talking about frustration. There's a lot of, moments in our lives where we'll feel some sort of resistance in the things we're trying to achieve. And that can be pretty annoying and pretty frustrating. Next, I transitioned into talking about something that was a big part of my childhood and really helped shape my horror, like the love for horror and the scary genre in general. And that's the Goosebumps books. Just generally dived into the amazingness that Goosebumps was for my generation. Then I wanted to transition into talking about a movie that I had heard about, a long, like made back in 1906, and is considered to be the first like feature length narrative film, and it's called The Story of the Kelly Gang. And I kind of thought it was an amazing thing, was reading about it, and I kind of wanted to just share it. And then lastly, I wanted to end it on talking about just just have a little fun talking about an invention that was from one of my favorite video games. I love the video game Fallout 4, and one of the robots, one of the many crazy things in that game is there's a robot called Mr. Handy, and it's just like a multi-purpose robot. And I thought it would be kind of fun to think about having one in real life. So if you want to listen to any of those topics, please continue to listen in. I appreciate everybody for stopping by as always. But before we get anywhere, how's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm happy to get into episode 44 with y'all. And we're gonna talk, like I said, we're gonna talk a little bit about like frustration, talk about some Goosebumps books, talk about the story of the Kelly gang, Mr. Handy. But I understand that sometimes it could be hard to kind of like think about what you want to do every single day, just besides like your basic everyday living. I find like hobbies is something that I try to fill my life up with a little bit. And I got so many things I think I want to do, and I always like think that would be fun to do, but I never truly try. I never dive into anything. And in turn, I guess like my hobby becomes thinking of hobbies. But it's hard to like think about just like besides doing the basic things of every day, taking care of yourself and going to work or whatever. It's hard to think that even there's time for that kind of stuff. But I think it's important to know that we need to try to make time for that kind of thing. I try it, I'm always trying to think of things to do. And it doesn't matter what it is. I should just try to give it a little bit of that energy as soon as I think about it. And, maybe it's that little bit of peace throughout the day. And I think that's something that a lot of people could then look forward to, like when they have that downtime, when you have a day off and, you take care of everything else and you just needed something to take your mind away. I think it's important to have hobbies, right? It feels like that's something that like therapists say a lot, or everybody like whenever you're talking to someone about, I just need something in my life to kind of take me out of work. It's stressing me out, yada yada. It always feels like it's like, well, what do you have any hobbies? It's always the next thing. And the hobby doesn't have to be like anything serious, right? I feel like it doesn't have to be anything that necessarily like is extreme. You don't have to go like build things necessarily. Like, I play video games. I don't know how much of a hobby that's considered or whatever, but it's something I get. It's my escape or whatever. Sometimes I think of like when I think of a hobby, I think of something that's like skill. Maybe that's what I kind of set in my mindset. So I don't think, I mean, video games, you can be skillful at video games, but it's not like applicable skill to most of life, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I know that everybody's just doing their best and, just whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Just have something to kind of take you away from your everyday existence. But yeah, nonetheless, let's go ahead and hop into episode 44. As I've gotten older, my love for like the scary horror stories, movies, things like that has only grown stronger. I feel like I was introduced to, scary things as a kid. I think as most of us are, and not everything sticks right off the bat. I mean, truly think, scary is supposed to be scary. So I was a typical kid, scared of most things. But nonetheless, I like that feeling. And till this day, I still kind of like, I love the jumpiness. It's not the best feeling, but I like being scared. I kind of like having my senses heightened, kind of all in the name of fun. Obviously, I don't like being scared in like real world scenarios, but when I'm watching a movie or I'm reading a story, I love the scare. I love being scared. And one of the things that helped me kind of shape that love for horror or helped shape that love for, scary stuff is the Goosebumps books. Also the TV show a little bit, but I really remember the books I think more than the TV show. As a kid, I just remember like if you would just immediately be, looking at that cover and be like, "Whoa, that looks a little spooky." And then you get into it and each book wasn't very long, right? So they're pretty digestible. And for like any kid throughout elementary school, middle school, whatever it may be, even older, like they're pretty easy to read. And it's just funny thinking about like all the different types of stories that were written, and it feels like it was just kind of like one of those things where it's like just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Just make up an idea and just run with it a little bit. I think that's kind of I've heard this kind of the key to writing stories sometimes is things aren't always going to sound good when you first think of it, maybe, but as you write and as you kind of think of things, it kind of gets a little bit better. But I love the Goosebumps books, and till this day, they're still being made. And I know that there's been like movies, and I think they rebooted the TV show recently. And so, I thought it'd be kind of fun just to kind of think of some of the Goosebumps books, like more of the most popular ones, because those are the kind of the ones that I remember. So I kind of formulated my own like top 10 most popular, not any special ranking or anything, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to shout that out. But before maybe do a little history, just shout out to the Goosebumps books in general. I mean, the author is R.L. Stein, so immediately that. And I heard, I don't know how true this is, but I heard that he wrote these scary children's books because he kind of like not maybe not necessarily hated kids, but he definitely he definitely liked scaring kids. And so, I mean, he, legendarily made the Goosebumps books. Also happened to write Fear Street, if you ever read any of the Fear Street books. I also know Netflix put out like three Fear Street like movies. And then also he wrote Man Thing, which is a Marvel comic. It's kind of like away from the superhero, more of the supernatural being type thing. And that was made into a Netflix thing as well. So I think that's pretty awesome. He's managed to expand a little bit, but I'll stay in that kind of scary, spooky-ness. He was born in Columbus, Ohio, 1943. I thought that was fun. He's been doing it for a long time, still around. And like I said, still making up books. But the original series started in July of 1992. I guess that's when the first book, Welcome to Dead House, was the first book, I'm pretty sure. Um, that's it's pretty sorry, I'm trying to think. So but that's pretty long ago. That was before I was born. And like but it's so funny to think that I mean he was releasing books into my childhood and the TV show was going into my childhood. So he never left. It was like always he was always there. And they're timeless books like I said. But apparently, like, there's multiple spin-off series. So, like, the original series went from 92 to 97, which, okay, which I didn't really think about it like that. But then he had, like, Goosebumps 2000, which was 98 to 2000, which was just new stories. And then there was the Give Yourself Goosebumps books, which he put out from 95 to, like, 2000, which was a choose your own scare book. It was like, you'd read like something and then it would give you like an option like you turn to a specific page to see what the reveal is or whatever. It's pretty cool. I think I kind of remember those ones. um Tales to Give You Goosebumps, which he did from 94 to 97. They're just like short stories, as well as Goosebumps triple header. I don't know what that is, but again, short stories around that same time period. And then in the more modern era, he's done like Goosebumps Horrorland from 2008 to 2012. He had like those kind of series. which are new stories. And then he had Goosebumps Most Wanted from 2012 to 2016, and then he had the Goosebumps Slappy World, 2017 to 2023, which I guess are narrated stories by Slappy himself, Slappy World, which was the Night of the Living Dummies like main, antagonist. And then he's recently doing Goosebumps House of Shivers, which he started last year in 2023. New stories. And so, I mean, just tons of like just still doing it. And like I think, it seems like he took like a period of time in the 2000s and just let things do, let them be. And I'm sure probably staying in writing in his desk and trying to come up with more stories or whatever. But I've never read any of the the new things. I've only read like the original series. I think I've read a couple of the Give Yourself Goosebumps books, I think. But I only really remember the original series. I just think about like I think about the covers more so, right? Like I think about how awesome those covers were. But the first Goosebumps book was Welcome to Dead House. It was about a family, the Bensons, who moved into this place called Dark Falls, and the town seems eerily empty, and secretly everyone's like undead. They're like this, it's like zombies basically, and it's because of a yellow gas leak that happened or whatever. I think I remember that's what the premise was. I tried my best to like go back and read like a synopsis on each of the books so I can give my own little bit of synopsis. Which each of them are not very long books, so it's not like a lot goes on. It's kind of like one major event kind of happens and then it feeds out through there. Which, good storytelling. Very basic. But yeah, um so yeah, I went through, kind of looked at a couple different lists as well as like kind of formulated like the ones that I remember, and I tried to form like a top 10 most popular, the ones that I feel like people mention the most, or like it's the ones that, yeah, people like think of when they first think of Goosebumps or something like that. And then objectively, like ones that were like maybe sold the best. Like I said, I tried to wrap it up. So, I Welcome to Dead House, one of the most popular ones. Right off the bat, it kind of led off the whole series, but that is one of the most popular books given, 100%. But number two that I had written down, like I said, it's not any specific order, but number two I had was The Haunted Mask, which was like the one that I think I remember when it comes to the TV show specifically. It's just a mask that possesses a little girl. Her name is Carly Beth, and just she does evil stuff. That's just a basic thing. She finds the mask at like a Halloween shop, I'm pretty sure, and she like can't take the mask off. Like once she puts it on, she's possessed. And like that one, I was a little freaked out about. It kind of made me scared, I think, to put my head in a mask for a minute, and I'm not joking about that. Like a full on, like the ones that like feel like they're like a sleeve over your full head, not the ones that kind of tie to a string in the back type thing. Not that, like a full on thing. But that's one that I remember, especially with the TV show. That's kind of the one that I remember most, I think. Next I had was One Day at Horrorland. It's the Morris family gets lost on a road trip, only to be trapped in a hellish version of Disneyland. And I don't remember that one. I think I remember kind of the picture. Obviously, the pictures are what stands out the most. But that's still a good. I mean, like nonetheless, still a good story. Basic, like I said, it's getting lost on a road trip. You pull off to the side, and like, oh, look at this cool attraction. Like, why not go and enjoy it? Kind of like the small, attraction off the main road. Kind of enticing people to come, and unfortunate evils are waiting for them type thing. I like that kind of story. So that's a pretty good one. But that's one I know that I've heard. I just don't remember that one that much. The next one is The Girl Who Cried Monster. Um, Prankster Lucy Dark, great name, discovers the local librarian is a real monster, but nobody believes her often deceitful nature. I do remember that one. I guess I didn't remember it was a librarian. I thought it was a. Oh, okay, yeah. I have that one written later. It's because there's one that's like a teacher is like doing experiments or something like that. I think that's one of them. Okay, I confused myself. Sorry. Yeah, but that one, I kind of I remember that one because I remember the whole like, of course they wouldn't believe her type thing. Like, well, what do you expect? You know, you're playing jokes on everybody, and it was always kind of the thing like when you're told as a kid that you don't want to play around with that stuff, you don't want to lie, because then eventually nobody's gonna believe you. So that that really honed it in for me as a kid. I was like, I ain't gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. I promise I'm not gonna lie. Just in case my evil librarian. But also like perfect name, Lucy Dark, of course. Perfect name. But we'll keep moving. Next one on the list I had was Say Cheese and Die. This one I remember. This one was like the cover was the skeletons posing for like the family picture or whatever type thing. It's like the most one of the most iconic ones. But it's about friends Greg, Sherry, and Michael and Bird discover a cursed camera that premonitions future tragedies. So that's pretty good. I honestly think about some of these stories like you could shift them out of the child kind of mindset, like the child teen scares, and you could make these into pretty real like movie. It's kind of I guess this is kind of the premise for Shutter, even though that's kind of like not Shutter Island, but Shutter, which was the one about like the haunted camera. But I think that one's more about seeing like the already like dead or the already spirit world, not premonitions. It's like Fatal Frame or whatever. If you ever played that video game, but that one's a very memorable one. I think most people kind of remember that one. Next on the list is arguably also like one of the most memorable ones is Night of the Living Dead. It's the reason that we have Slappy. It's literally like the whole like thing with like I think fed into the whole scare. I mean, if Chucky didn't do it for you in the 80s and 90s, it would have been Slappy with the Goosebumps things. It would have been Annabelle more in the recent times. That's pretty funny. But yeah, it's a twins Lindy and Chris find a discarded dummy in the trash, seeming harmless until the doll comes to life and causes mayhem. And I kind of remember the TV show. The I don't know if I guess I don't remember. I don't know if I remember like the first one, but I remember one of like Night of the Living Dummy like part two or like part three or something like that. I think I kind of remember that episode. As a kid, we had me and my little sister had like a Goosebumps DVD, and I don't remember how many of the episodes it had, but it definitely had like one of the parts of the Night of the Living Dead. I can't remember what else they had. I just remember that one. But it's the cover is slappy. It's like that. That's pretty iconic in that way. But next on the list, the Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. This one I kind of remember, but kind of I don't know if I think it's just like it's a literally a mummy coming out of sarcophagus. I think that's the cover. Very literal, you know what I'm saying? But 12-year-old Gabe and his parents visit their family member Uncle Ben, who is an archaeologist who is on the verge of a sinister discovery, a curse unleashing in the Great Pyramid of Giza, entrapping the family, forcing them to try to escape deadly mummies and other misfortunes. Which is something like as I've gotten older and I kind of think about like some of these like read you even if you're not into the Bible or anything or like you're not into maybe like you don't believe certain old stories or whatever, however you feel, but I like hearing them nonetheless. And when you hear some things about like Egyptian curses, like that's always a thing. Like these mummy or like it's not all of them are over. Not every mummy's curse or something like that. There's not a bunch of curses just happening. That was always kind of the thing, like, that was, like, something you learn about some of these stories that was something they kinda believed in and they kind of fed into. So, it's retroactively a little more scarier than I think it was. I don't think I remember reading that book as much. I just think, I wasn't interested in that one. I don't know. I think I kinda just skipped over that one. But yeah, we'll keep moving. The next one on the list I had is It Came From Beneath the Sink. This one I remember. I remember it was like the picture of literally like the kitchen sink with eyes popping out the bottom cupboards or whatever. Siblings Kat and Daniel discover a sponge-like creature living in their new house who attracts bad luck and mayhem while feeding off of fear and bad luck itself. So like, it's just that undescribable evil type thing that monster that you don't really know the origins from, but he's there. They're there. It's and I like that like it's sponge-like creature, so it's supposed to be non-assuming at first, but then obviously it just quickly enacts this bad luck and mayhem, yada yada yada. But I do kind of remember that one. That one's it's there's all these stories are so basic, like I said, that I feel like they either run together or you just kind of forget about them a little bit. But I think that one's one of my favorites. Um, okay, so the next one I have two more. I have Stay Out of the Basement, which was Margaret and Casey Brewer start to notice that their father is acting weirder and weirder as he furthers himself into sinister research that blurs the lines between plants and monsters. And I do remember that one. That one for sure I do remember. I remember like when I was a kid, growing up as a kid, I watched this these movies called Creep Show 1 and 2, and they're just like an anthology movie where it's just a bunch of scary stories. But I think in the second one, there's this like story of this kid who buys this like Venus flytrap, and it grows to be like this monstrous thing, and it eats its bullies and like eats his like abusive dad type thing, yada yada. But reading this book, reading Stay Out of the Basement, and then watching like that, it always made me think like, what if? And then you hear about stories about like poisonous plants in like the Amazon, or like poison like a poison oak or something like that. And it's like, maybe some plants do have a certain animalistic thing. Not all animals are going to attack people, but it's kind of one of those things. And so I always like that idea of the plants and monsters type thing. And the cover was the father was like a vine creature or whatever. It's pretty cool. It's one of the more memorable ones. But one more on the list. This one I remember this one, not by reading it, but I'll talk about it after I read the list. But um, he also made there was these graphic comics that came out about the Goosebumps books that like detail some of the stories in like a graphic comic kind of way. But the last story I have is the scarecrow walks at midnight. Sorry. Siblings Jody and Mark spend summer vacation at their grandparents' once cheery but now eerie farm, alongside farmhand Stanley, who has been reading a special book that brings the scarecrow to life. And like I said, I don't think I remember the book as much, but when I was like a preteenish, 11ish or whatever, I got this like graphic novel that was like a comic of certain stories. And so I thought that was cool. I remember it had the Scarecrow Walks at Night, it had the Abominable Snowman one, and then it had, I don't know, a werewolf one, I think. I can't remember. But yeah, those are like the 10 like most like popular books. But I think everybody has their own opinion. I think those are just kind of the more memorable ones, like I said, and the ones that I think I could kind of remember. Some of them I do, some of them I really don't, or I just like didn't really remember reading necessarily. But like I mentioned earlier, I mean, with the TV show that ran for like a couple seasons, like for at least a few years, and recently being rebooted, there was a couple movies as well, and apparently like a few video games. I didn't really look those up, but and then he had they had a comic series. They had 8 comics based on the books. There was Creepy Creatures, Terror Trips, Scary Summer, and a Slappy's Tales of Horror, which were what the comics were called. A few of them, I guess. I think the one I had was Creepy Creatures because it was like the Scarecrow, Abominable Snowman, and then a werewolf one. That's the thing. That's the one I remember having, I think. And then there's some newer additions to those comics that they have. Monster at Midnight, Download and Die, and then Horrors of the Witch House, and then Secrets of the Swamp, I guess as well. And he that series was only about from 2006 to 2021, so he did it for a while. Like I said, I remember being about 11, so it'd have been 2007 when I got it, and I remember that graphic novel being cool. It was a good way to visualize the books. But yeah, I think like most kids my age, we all kind of are influenced. If you love horror, you for sure are influenced by those Goosebumps books. And even if you didn't read the books, maybe you were the type of kid that just liked looking at the covers. I know I did. I know for sure I did. And I just like thinking that there's new generations of kids that will get to read great stories and great scary stories that will one day hopefully fuel them to love the horror genre in general. People can potentially become pretty annoyed in life when they can't achieve what they intend to. When there is some sort of resistance in our will, We can become upset with the lack of fulfillment. There are perceived encumbrances we might have when we are trying to live our lives, and it is very frustrating to have any sort of wrench kind of thrown in that desire to move forward. Frustration is a feeling that isn't particular to one person, and often everybody might feel it at some time in their life. Not everything is seamless with how we handle our days. When enough resistance happens, it furthers the idea of like nothing good is ever going to happen, and like why is it even like, what's the worth of this all? Perpetuated anger of what is next or what is what sorry, a perpetuated of anger of what is in store next is pretty frustrating. And that frustration can impede someone to continue fulfilling themselves in their lives. With expectation with sorry, I'll keep messing up. I'm sorry. With expectations being let down and failure at what you thought you're more able to do, frustration is only to come. It's inevitable. You just got to kind of remember, I guess, to just do what you can and know that there are these moments, these denied moments in your life, and that doesn't tell what the future brings. Sometimes things are just not going to work out. And even when you have the strongest of intentions and you have a certain will to try to do something and keep going in life, there's going to be some sort of resistance. And whether it's something that may be a self-inflicted resistance or just the natures of the world, I think inevitably there will be moments that kind of block you in your path. And when it piles up, I mean, that's not a good feeling, and it becomes a very frustrating feeling. You feel it's feeling upset, annoyed, or angered from that kind of perceived resistance of your own fulfillment of will. That's kind of the thing as humans, that we all have this kind of path to achieve something. It may not look the same, and some things are more, important to other people. But nonetheless, when there is that, like I said, a push against you, and you all of a sudden aren't able to fulfill every single aspect, it becomes pretty angry. It becomes annoying, and it really makes that motivation to keep going just disappear. Something inevitably will be there to deny you from completing intended actions. Not always, and sometimes some things will just seem so seamless. And even in moment to moment, time to time, when you go through certain aspects a multitude of times, one time it may seem seamless, the next time it may be harder. It's just no, there's no way of necessarily telling. So there is something that will be there to deny you. Inevitably, maybe once, maybe a few times. Who knows? Feelings of uncertainty, and it kind of brings on some sort of insecurity, and it makes you feel like insecure about your abilities. It makes you feel like you have an inability to fulfill needs and wants. I think when you are just it's in most things with a when there's a lack of direction maybe, or a lack of an outline, it can feel a little bit intimidating. And when all of a sudden, like, you take a step and it kind of crumbles underneath you, and you're like, okay, well, I'll shift my mentality, and you take the next step, but maybe it falls through just like the last one. That brings on insecurity for sure. It kind of just makes you think like, well, what can I do? Where can I start? It just stops you. And there's obviously going to be things you need to take care of, and there's things that you want to take care of, but more importantly, there's going to be needs in your life that you're going to have to do. And as things happen, it may be a little hard to take care of if you just let things go, or if you push it to the side because you're frustrated by it. Frustration is a natural thing. It's hard to say necessarily what's the one specific thing that frustrates us, but high expectations. I think that's a big thing. When you kind of go from, well, I have an absolute idea of what I want to do, or what I need out of this, or you think you have a certain, picturesque goal, that's a high standard for yourself. And when you expect it to come out and it all of a sudden it doesn't, that's very frustrating. I think in most situations when you go from an extreme high to an extreme low, that's just it discombobbles your equilibrium, right? It's kind of one of those things where it's like it feels even worse when it's the higher fall, when you go down further. Even sometimes with like perceived capability, that can be frustrating when you think you are only good enough for certain things, or you feel like you can do something, and then all of a sudden you're not able to based off of yada, yada, yada. That's kind of a big thing too. Especially when it comes to that moment to moment thing where maybe at one time you were a little more capable, but now you're not. That can hurt. I think we all want to feel a little bit capable, and we know that we have certain abilities. So when that resistance comes and it might put a little bit of that like blanket over what we think we can do. Also, sometimes with that kind of high expectations, that preconceived outcome, the idea that this is what's supposed to happen if I do something. You kind of think that like if I put this amount of work into it and I take these steps, that it will happen to be this way. But that's not always the case. It can be the case a lot of times, but as nature and probability kind of just plays out, it's not always going to be that way. You can think it's going to be great and you can, will it as much as you want. It just might not happen. And furthermore, I guess like what else certain just life concepts in general, not even before like you step into something and you take a step towards trying to achieve something, you might get already frustrated with thinking of it. You might already be upset that you have to handle this certain life concept. You might already be kind of angered by the fact that it even popped up and all of a sudden you have to deal with it. We don't want to deal with things that we don't, want. We don't want to deal with things that we don't want to. You know what I'm saying? We don't like it. So when the inevitable happens, as most things do, everybody's going to have a few unwanted problems, a few unwarranted, things being thrown at you. But it's part of life. Unfortunately, is frustrating. And then also, I think like interactions with others. Not always, but I think you you should always come in with the idea that you're not always going to get along with everybody. But unfortunately, again, when you interact maybe with other people and it's just not how it goes, or it feels like it's they're not willing to listen to you, or maybe you really don't have that willingness, so you're kind of defensive or whatever. That's frustrating. Or like someone's trying to help you, or like you have to kind of interact with someone in a certain thing and it just doesn't work. And that can be absolutely annoying and very upsetting. But all kind of accumulating into this idea of fulfillment of free will, but then having some sort of resistance to it. And a lot of times it can be kind of formed in ourself, right? I think that's kind of the thing with most feelings is unfortunately it can be, you know, caused by an outside turn, it's an outside thing, but you feel it. And so you have to deal with it and you're going to have to eventually work through that feeling. So it may have been something that on your outside life happened and it made you frustrated, but you are the one that still is dealing with that feeling and perpetuating that feeling. Having needs constantly ignored too, unsatisfied. I think that's a big thing too. Throw that in there. I think when you feel like you're constantly being kicked aside, or you feel like you're just constantly not pushing, getting things done that you need to do or want to do or whatever, that can be frustrating. I think that's just a few things that cause frustration, though. Like I said, there's so many outside effects that can do it, but you're just gonna have to deal with this yourself. That's the whole thing. Is at the end of the day, you're gonna have to do it yourself. You're gonna have to work through it. And there are so many, I think, effects when it comes to frustration. Just besides just like the feeling that comes out of being upset or being annoyed, it kind of can perpetuate and take control of certain aspects of your mind and how you feel, like deeper than just like an emotion or something like that. See, a poor self-esteem, that's a big thing. When you are someone that you feel like you're capable of doing something and you feel like you can achieve certain things and you don't, that gives you a lot of poor self-esteem. That can make you feel like you're not good at something and you're not capable at stuff. Something I feel very strongly. I know that I get frustrated like crazy. And when I get frustrated at the little things and I get frustrated at things that I'm usually not frustrated with, it makes me feel stupid. It makes me feel like, well, who am I to get angry at this? Like, why can't I just do it? Like, you're better than this, Gunther. Like, or maybe I'm not better than this, and that kind of feeds into that poor self-esteem, 100%. undoubtedly stress too, right? That's a huge effect of frustration. It kind of that buildup of tension. You're kind of building up anger. Which is another kind of effect is anger. But you kind of start building up all that tension, and it becomes stressful. And maybe when you're trying your best and you take a step, but then when you stop because that resistance that's pushing against you, then things can kind of pile up, causing more stress. Undoubtedly, when all that kind of mixes into even depression. I think depression is like it's this weird thing of like a total lack of everything. I feel like when people talk about depression, sometimes you'll hear about it as like a sad thing, but in my turn, suffering from depression myself, I think it's like a lack of feeling anything. Which, if you have a certain emotion, for sure that you feel harsher than everything else, that you feel stronger than everything else, that can make you feel very drained and then leave you in that pits of depression. I think often like my worst depression comes after times of more like high anxiety, like levels of emotion, and then all of a sudden my low is this depression. And so that's the thing, like with frustration, if you're getting constantly mad at things and you're kind of building up this tension, you got this overflowing stuff and you're constantly like, tired from that kind of constant expression, then the depression comes in. And furthering with that, just like, you become annoyed with things and you maybe enact certain like aggressive behavior, unhealthy behaviors or something like that. And that maybe be more of the extreme, right? Is like the more aggressiveness, but when you're annoyed, you don't know what you're gonna do. You kind of just like snap, and like you can separate yourself from something, but if you're perpetuated in that annoyance, you're gonna come back to it, and you're gonna look at it unhealthily. You're gonna look at it with some sort of aggressive nature, and you're gonna maybe try to force something that you thought should have worked earlier, and you're just gonna try to hone in on that one thing and become even more frustrated that it's not working out. That's just like a few effects of frustration. And that's the unfortunate kind of slippery slope that happens is like you can get annoyed with things and feel upset about things. That's part of like the natural human emotion. It's just if you didn't lean into it, you fully go into that kind of thing, and it just hurts. It'll just kind of it perpetuates all these other emotions, and and it has these strong effects on you, and even on the outside when you interact with other people. Um, it's just it's an interesting thing. Obviously that frustration comes from resistance. And resistance to what? We really don't know. In certain aspects, like when you're doing certain things in life, not every a resistance, some sort of pushing back force is not going to be the same for everything. Just because different situations. But there are inevitably certain internal and kind of external blockers, undoubtedly. When you have that lack of, ability or a lack of confidence, you have like conflicting desires, conflicting ideologies in your head. Those are the internal blockers. That's the internal resistance that you might feel, right? Is kind of this idea that you're telling yourself that you can't do something, and unfortunately, it's causing that resistance, even though you have a certain will to try to fulfill something. And then like with like external factors, there are certain physical roadblocks. There's super difficult tasks. Certain things that feel like you feel are like a wasted time or things that maybe kind of unexpectedly were a little harder than you thought. Those are all external. Those are very much so the things that are physically represented. Things that just kind of happen because of XYZ. Maybe you lose a job and you move, or like, you were able to do XYZ, but ABC is way harder, you know what I'm saying? Or you kind of were given your time and you were super motivated at first, but because of the harshness of the things and all the unexpectedness that you had to put into something, it makes it feel like all of a sudden you wasted your time, even though you may be halfway through something. You don't know. I just think like inevitably the resistance, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to deal with it yourself, but you can't deny that there's the external resistances as well. But you're gonna have to, I think it feeds right back into the internal resistances, the internal thought. So you're gonna have to you're gonna have to navigate it. It's uber important to have a place to express yourself. There is 100% a need to express emotions, and it's not healthy to suppress anything, especially when it's those really stronger negative emotions like frustration, anger, sadness, things like that. those just bring you down and they drain you. Coming from someone who suffers from those really harsh, like, major emotions, and I feel them harshly, and I'm very cathartic with it. It just drains me, and I know it's not healthy to suppress. And at times, I feel guilty for expressing myself because it kind of feels like I'm just like throwing it on people, or I'm just throwing it out there. But I know in the back of my head that it's helping me out. It's making me feel a little bit better, and I just know that it's worse to suppress it. But let's say, you are frustrated, and let's say you want to get past that. You want to deal with it, or you want to avoid it as in general. I think there is a certain mindfulness. I think that's most important is you kind of have to be aware of things that frustrate you, and some things may all of a sudden, happen that kind of frustrates you, and you weren't thinking about it that way before. But that kind of leads in with, like, eventually then you become mindful of it. You take in what you experienced, the annoyance, the anger that you felt, and you say, well, maybe I'm not best suited for that. I think that's important. It's something I'm trying to get better at with, trying to be mindful of how I act. Express yourself in appropriate moments. When you are frustrated and maybe you are in that moment of like anger, don't take it out on the thing that you're trying to do or yourself or on someone else. Take a moment to sit back and say, "Hey, like, I understand, like, this is what's happening to me. I just gotta like be the mindfulness." And then just say like, "Hey, I'll talk about it later," or like, I'll go talk to someone about it. Maybe someone knows a little bit better about it. But if you're kind of expressing it in the midst of frustration and that tension, it's just going to come off wrong, and it's not going to be the way you want it to be. It's just going to be frustrating even more. Practicing, I think, a little bit of empathy for yourself too. Just know that, like, you are gonna feel emotions. You are gonna feel certain things, and it not always gonna be frustration. In all emotions, you're gonna feel things. So if something becomes, it challenging, and also expecting challenges is a big thing, and expecting failure is a big thing. So you got to kind of practice empathy in that way, that you're going to have to go through certain hard things, maybe more than you expected, or you're going to maybe fail because failure is inevitable. So just give yourself a little patience, give yourself a little leeway, and say like, hey, like, I'm doing what I need to do. At least I'm trying. You know what I'm saying? I think in general, releasing expectations, that's a big thing. I think releasing control, releasing that kind of expectation, thinking that you can will everything, and because you were able to do it, or you do all these other things, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to handle this other aspects. So release expectations. Just know that you're going to try as a human being. Know that you have a certain ability as a person, but if that ability doesn't show through, then that's okay, especially when it's unexpected, when it's something new. You got to make sure to release that control and just say, like, hey, I'm just going to let it do. And I'm just going to be the best I can be and try to do what I can. Just overall trying to change that attitude, kind of changing the mentality you have. Having a little little social support, friends, family, people you can talk to, that always helps as well. People that understand that you're frustrated and can be that calming presence. But I think everybody feels a little frustration. Some more than others, and some people express it, more externally, or some people might express it more internally. But there are inevitably things in our lives that will kind of offer resistance to things we want to fulfill, whether it's our needs or our wants. There's going to be some unexpected challenges that kind of get thrown in, and we're not always going to be able to handle it necessarily. But do your best to try to work through it. And if you are frustrated with something, separate yourself from the situation and reevaluate. In the modern age we live in the 2020s and in like the 2010s and stuff like that, technology has been on the rise. It feels like a lot of people kind of have shifted over into a more like technologically kind of advanced, or technologically savvy kind of culture or whatever. And a lot of things you see is like people love like certain assisted products or appliances or anything that kind of automates certain things in your life. That seems to be most popular. I'm always for a little practicality, if something can be done, with a simpler function than you having to do it as a person or whatever, however that works through technology. I don't know how much simpler it is necessarily, but some people like that. And they like the idea that there are things that can be kind of taken care of in your life through technology, and with the rise of like AI and stuff like that, with the intelligence that's kind of streaming through, it kind of makes you think on when the world can go. One of my favorite video games ever is Fallout 4. The Fallout series in general is a very great franchise, and it kind of plays around with the post-apocalyptic world, but also alternate reality as well. It like takes place in the future, but is an alternate future where in World War II, instead of dropping nuclear bombs on Japan, we there was a ceasefire that was basically like signed, and that started a race for like nuclear energy to see who can use nuclear energy the best around the world. And so in the Fallout universe, the society is like stuck in like the 50s basically. But it's because everything was made with like nuclear energy, or like everything's running through these certain like, endless cells of power or whatever. Yada yada. But a lot of the cool things about the game is there's all these cool kind of technologies that are in the game. One of the like your character's immediately equipped with this thing called a Pip Boy, which I'll talk about maybe in a future episode, honestly. But it's kind of this cool piece of technology. It's kind of a hub that shows you, like, for your game, it shows you, your inventory and your skills and all the perks you have, and, what mission and quest you're on or whatever. But it kind of makes me think, like, in a lot of other games too, like, there's these fake products that are made, or, based off of the world they've created something that kind of fits into that a little bit. One of the coolest inventions I think that's any Fallout game, but specifically I think of in Fallout 4, is there's this robot. It's a multi-purpose robot used in assisting people in the game called Mr. Handy. I realize now it's kind of an unfortunate name, so I'm thinking about how it's gonna sound in the title. But yeah, Mr. Handy is just a robot. It's like this hovering robot that's literally like a butler mixed with like a, personal contractor mixed with like a friend. Just a good friend. And in Fallout 4, you specifically get a Mr. Handy that's called Codsworth. And like you in Fallout 4, it's the first time that you get to see before the bombs, or before, like, okay, so it's an alternate future in Fallout. It's filled with nuclear energy. The society's stuck in the 50s, but eventually bombs do get dropped, but it's everybody dropping bombs, and that's what makes it post-apocalyptic. But in Fallout 4 specifically, you start out before the bombs are dropped, and you like run to like one of the bunkers, one of the vaults that are they're called in the games, owned by Vault Tech, which is like this company, this kind of sketchy, whatever. But you head into the vault, you get cryogenically frozen, woken up several hundred years later, and you like come back to this post-apocalyptic world. Codsworth is still there, dog. You know what I'm saying? So you're like it's this harmonious, reuniting, and it's a friendly face, even though they don't have a face. But like through the game, you meet a few different Mr. Handies, and they all have their own like personalities, and they do their own things. And but I was kind of thinking, especially in the modern world, obviously we don't live in the Fallout universe, and that still takes place even before the bombs are dropped. It takes place in the future. I think like 50 years in the future from now. But I was like thinking, I was like, how crazy is that though? Like having a robot, a Mr. Handy, this multi-purpose robot that just kind of does things for you. Yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing. Um, I wrote down some like history. I thought it'd be fun to kind of ponder upon that. But the history of Mr. Handy. The Mr. Handy robot was made by a company that's in the game called Atomics International. So, General Atomics International is like the company that basically is the reason for the nuclear power, the reason that nuclear energy has been made so popularized in the universe, the Fallout universe. 2037 is, I don't know if that's when the company formed. I think that's when the Mr. Handy was invented. So it's like a really new product when you're in the game. 'Cause most of the games usually take place like, 2100s or something like past that, 2200 or something like that. But like I said, in the modern day, especially in our real life, it's kind of fun to think about having a robot like that. Now, I don't know technology. I don't know the logistics of like having a hovering around robot in that sense, but when you see certain things, like certain restaurants will have robot like waiters kind of thing, or hosts more so, or like you see on the streets like the little like buggies that are just riding around dropping off a food delivery or something like that. So I kind of love thinking about that. I kind of love like I'm a little scared. I'm not gonna. I'll admit that it's a little frightening to think about shifting completely into a technology dependent or like a robotics dependent, society. But it's almost like it's an inevitable with kind of how advanced things are just going and how advanced things are. It feels like that could be a possibility. Will we get a Mr. Handy one day? I don't know. I think in my life, I think it would be nice. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and lie and say that it wouldn't be nice to have some assistance. I don't do a lot in general, but like when it comes to cooking, like I don't want to eat takeout. I've been doing really good about, making my own. If you hear my cat meowing, I'm sorry. But I'm doing better about making my own meals recently and cooking my own food. But a Mr. Handy would be great. You know, my room gets a little messy, and I would like to be able to be more clean, and I can just do that. But I mean, if I had a Mr. Handy, then I ain't got to worry about it. But it's basically like Mr. Handy would just be like an automatic, like a food processor mixed with like a freaking air fryer mixed with a Roomba mixed with a vacuum. It's just like things we have now, but you would just piece it together in one, spherical shaped hovering robot, dude. I mean, I think it feels like that's just like everybody wouldn't mind a little assisted living in that way. I like having independence 100%. I think most people do, but it would be nice, 100%. Or I could just, if I don't feel like working, I just send out Mr. Handy. He can, well, as long as the job gets done, who cares? But it's funny to think about. I mean, if you wanted to, like, say you had a house and you wanted to build on like an extension to your house, you get approved by the city, Mr. Handy build it for you. But I don't even. Codsworth is like the perfect name. That's the one. Like I said, that's the robot you have in Fallout 4, specifically in Fallout 4. But I don't know what mine would be. I don't even know if you get. I don't know if they named the robot. I think he like came as Codsworth, or he like introduced himself as Codsworth. And they all have different like he has like a British accent, but they all have different accents. They're like they have all their own personalities too. That's the whole thing. Is like I've the Fallout lore, like the whole backstory behind all Fallout is pretty unreal, and it's like expansive and really deep. So you could spend your time, reading and writing and or like, looking up all that stuff, but that's kind of hard. I mean, it's so much. But I think it's kind of fun to think about like having someone like a Mr. Handy. So, I thought it would be fun to kind of play with the idea. The game offers so much other things too. The world itself is like, obviously the post-apocalypticness is kind of weird to think, but the playing around with that idea of like instead of using nuclear and nuclear power for bombs and kind of how we've used it today, to think about it used for like energy or used it for power or something like that. I've read very minimally on like what nuclear power would like look like or like how it would function, but it seems like it's like a longer lasting energy source and it seems like it's pretty like it's like recharging or something like that. I'm so done with that kind of stuff. I'm not a scientist. I'm not no physicist, man. I'm just someone who plays video games and likes to read articles and read a few things when it comes around. But nonetheless, like the whole world that it kind of creates this like where it's stuck in the 50s kind of culture, but it's long lasting because of like how the technology has been made. It's been made better, and if in like the whole world kind of like led into that like that advancement in like robotics and making things a little bit better rather than an advancement in electronics and technology and stuff. So it kind of makes you think. Even like today with like new technologies It feels like you could have like with new models that come out or something like that. It's like you could have maybe just used the old model, just made it better or something like that. It makes me think, especially with cars or something like that. With cars being more computerized and having more technology in them, it kind of feels like what's the point? I mean, have automatic seat warmers to be able to connect your Bluetooth. I mean, who gives a shit? I don't care. Like I usually use a car from point A to point B. And as much as I love a nighttime drive, I don't really need that. I don't. So it makes you think how efficient is the electronics that we're kind of getting into, and like the path that we're taking as people. I still believe that people want to be like, purposeful in their own right and want to be, capable in their own right. But like I said, it's not a bad idea to think about maybe the one day having a Mr. Handy to come around. A multi-purpose robot that does everything you need in your household and more. I was snooping around the internet a little bit, Googling like lost treasures. And I thought it was fun to try to think about some podcast topics like that were a little more research oriented, something that was a little bit outside of just like mental health or, something that's maybe a little more driven in topic. So I was looking up like some like lost artifacts, lost treasures, some things like that, and I was coming across a lot of cool ones, a lot of like ancient world stuff, things that like I never heard of, or things that are associated with peoples in times that I've heard of, but never really knowing like much about it. And I've had a lot of fun looking things up, but one thing that kind of stuck out to me that I thought was interesting and it kind of stuck outside of the typical idea of what I think a treasure is, which is like gold or jewels or like a specific item like a sword or something like that. But I came across this one story, and it was talking about this lost film. It's the lost film considered to be the first full length narrative feature film, and it was a movie called The Story of the Kelly Gang. But this movie was considered to be the first like feature length film, the first film to break an hour runtime and made all the way back in 1906. So well over 100 years ago. But it was talking about how just because of like general like preservation and like nobody knew what filmmaking was going to be at the time and what films were going to be over time it just kind of got lost. And I think with like I did a little research, I'll talk about it in a second, but it was considered a full-length film all the way back in 1906. Obviously, a still silent black and white film. It was filmed in Australia too, around Melbourne, like around like some suburbs and areas like that. But the story chronicles a very legendary outlaw in Australia, and his name was Ned Kelly. Sorry, and his Bush Ranger gang, which I guess like I think Bush Rangers were like escaped prisoners or outlaws that were like hiding out in the Australian brushes, like the middle of nowhere, the middle of Australia, and like that was kind of like a thing that happened, and Ned Kelly specifically being one of the most memorable ones. But when I think about old films like that, I don't think about like, anything significant, and that's unfortunate. But then I don't think of anything like I think of like 15-minute movies, right? Silent movies, 15 minutes long, one thing happens and that's it. But this was breaking a barrier even before barriers were even set for filmmaking. I mean, it was like an hour long, and I couldn't believe that. I thought it was such a cool story. So, I did a little research. I tried to like do as much research as possible. It also happened to like that film popularized the Bush Ranger like genre at the time, which apparently was like what a lot of those early silent films in Australia were like about, were like Bush Rangers. Which it feels like when like Americans made like like outlaw movies, it was like it's the same vibe. But yeah, the original cut ran over an hour. It was 4,000 feet of reel, longest narrative film yet at that time. And it premiered originally at Melbourne's Athenaeum, yeah, Athenaeum, sorry, Athenaeum Hall on December 26th, 1906, which is crazy. And then apparently it made its way to the UK, shown in the UK around January 1908, which like the UK, I guess, had more of a bustling society in whatever sense that means or whatever. I don't know what that means. I don't know why I said that, but also with the arts, it felt like that was the best place to expose it. But as of 2022, currently there is only 17 minutes of the film known to survive. Very few like fragments and stills left out. So that's crazy. Just a very few things that we know about that film in general, and then very few, parts of that film left. 17 minutes. And when you think it says they said it ran over an hour. It has all this fucking story. Sorry for my language. It has all this story, and just to think that like none of it has to like survived. Only 17 minutes. But I suppose, 17 minutes is better than nothing. It's still a part of history, and it's part of like what helps us keep that like, open timeline, that open connection to that time. But it was directed by a man named Charles Tate, who also wrote it with his brother John Tate. The cast has been like kind of largely disputed, I think. I've heard like it was I read like few names, but this man named John Ford played Dan Kelly, which was one of the members of the Kelly gang, I think. And then younger brother Ned. Oh no, wait, hold on. Yeah, I'm confused. Like I said, I wrote down a few names, but this guy named John Ford played in the movie. Apparently, I guess Elizabeth Tate, who was like the sister of Charles and John, did like stunt double and was like also the actress for playing Kate Kelly, which was like Ned's sister in the movie. Like I said, I kind of confused myself. Oh, okay, so yeah, so John Ford, John Ford played Dan Kelly, which is Ned's younger brother, and then a man named Frank Mills played Ned Kelly, the titular character. And I don't know much else. And then this guy named Jay Ennis played part of the gang, and I think or whatever. And it's so disputed that some people were involved. It's so weird. I wish I was a little more definitive with that, but I just kept I've read a couple different names, and they said like it's disputed that over time people have said no, these people, no, these people, yada yada. But I got the chance to read, I guess based off of like the 17 minutes they have or whatever, they get some of the plot. According to the surviving okay, so they have like a program that kind of, pulled out each scene that was going to happen, kind of telling what the movie was going to be about. So they were able to save the synopsis of what happens. But so I'll give you the synopsis. I'll tell you the story. Just bear with me. So the first scene is as police discuss the warrant for Dan Kelly. Kate Kelly refuses attention of a trooper. So they're trying to look for Dan Kelly. They confront Kate Kelly. She, says, bye. Don't, yeah, I'm not telling you nothing. Scene two is the killings of Kennedy. Oh yeah. Okay. The killings of Kennedy, Scannion, and Lonigan at Stringy Bark Creek by gang. So three people were killed by the gang, by the Ned Kelly gang, out at Stringy Bark Creek. I don't know what that is. And then scene three, it has the holdup at Young Husband Station. It's bank holdup. So big peaking moment in the movie. Actual gang outlaw stuff. Scene four was various gang affiliates evade the police. Gang killing of Aaron Sherritt. Yeah. So, kind of a lot in the story already. They're just making things happen. It's kind of a fast moving story. You know what I'm saying? Scene five is an attempt to derail a train. Scenes at the Glen Rowan Inn. Police surrounded hotel. Dan Kelly and Steve Hart die by each other's hands. So I guess a shootout, you know what I'm saying? And Joe Byrne shot dead. So a shootout. Some people members of the gang. I think some police or whatever dying as well. So that's a lot. That's some action for a silent film too. I can only imagine just like the screen, like no sound, but things are just going down. People are like in the theater, just like, whoa, dude, he got shot. And then the last scene was like scene six. The last scene, Ned Kelly fights hard, shot in leg, begs for life, falls the last. Falls the last of the Kelly gang, so everybody gets captured. I think that's what happened to Ned Kelly. I think he got captured. I think. eventually maybe dying, maybe from the leg wound, maybe just from life, just dying. But yeah, six scenes. I guess I think I like I said it was the synopsis from a surviving program. So I don't know how if it's like that's the six scenes that were total in the film, or if that's just like the six scenes they were able to collectively realize or whatever. I don't know. Like I said, it's mystery, and that's what I loved when I was reading about the story of the Kelly Gang. That's what the movie is called, the story of the Kelly Gang. And so when I was reading about that, it just unreal. Just to think it's like a lost piece of media, a lost treasure, if you will. That's just not like a gold thing or whatever, like a piece of jewelry, a coffin, coffin of this great leader. It's a piece of film history, which is something I love. But a little bit more behind the production is, I guess, the estimated budget was 400 to £1,000. It took 6 months to do, I guess. Um, I think yeah. So $400, 400 to £1,000, 6 months to do. I wrote dispute 10 years. Yeah, dispute 10 years after film release on director and story writer. I don't know what I meant by that. I guess after it took some time. I don't know. Sorry, I guess I don't know what I wrote about that. I don't know why I said that. Um, but this man came out after like years later. This guy named W.J. Lincoln, and he claimed that Sam Cruz was actually the director, not this Charles Tate guy, but the Sam Cruz guy, and was the one that pieced together the story. I guess I think I have that Sam Cruz was the guy who like started the stage play, which apparently the movie was kind of based off of the stage play of the story of the Ned Kelly gang. Even though that's also disputed, a lot of this is like disputed. So a lot of things I'm going to say are like asterisk by it. There were some memoirs that were published in the early '70s that identifies Charles was hired because of theatrical experience. So maybe Charles is the one that started the play. Sam's Cruz like played in the play, and kind of they were the ones that or W.J. Lincoln's the one that said Sam Cruz, but according to some memoirs published in 1970, Charles was the one that was hired and was the one that directed it. And it was generally shot around suburbs in Melbourne. It was Heidelberg. I'm gonna butcher some of these names. I'm so sorry. Altham, Greensboro, Mitcham, and Rosanna. Those are the some suburbs. I don't know if those are still current suburbs or how big those suburbs are, but cool. It's what we know today about films. Shooting in surrounding locations. About I don't know how aware people were of it. You know what I'm saying? But now it's like a whole big extravagant thing. The costumes maybe were borrowed from E.I. Cole's Bohemian Company. And I guess E.I. Cole was like a theatrical entrepreneur, and so like he like sold costumes, other things for theater and stuff like that. And then some of the troop members may have been in the film. So some of the people that were playing on stage might have been in the film, which with kind of the lack of like for sure casting like list that I couldn't find, it makes sense to me. It kind of feels like there was more of that crossover, like with those early films, like people that played it on stage played in film. I guess so. Sir Rupert Clark, I don't know who that is, loaned the suit of Nelly armor used in the film. So I guess there was a Ned Kelly armor. So there was like this bit of armor that was made of just like iron, I guess, like or like just like random bits of like scrap metal that Ned Kelly would use when he would go rob things. And I think he did wear in like the movie. It was made through partnership. So yeah, so I guess it was made through a partnership between entrepreneurs John Tate and Nevin Tate. So brothers, the two brothers of Charles Tate, who were yeah, it's two brothers of the Tate brothers, and then as well as pioneering film exhibitors, Millard Johnson and William Gibson. So two dudes who were like on the verge of films and like distributing films and John Tate and Nevin Tate were obviously quick to go ask him. They were like the premier guys. And I guess also the Tate family in general owned the Melbourne Athenaeum. Yeah, I'm gonna say Athenaeum Hall, where the film debuted. So Make your own film, produce your own film, have some people help you make it, show it at your own place. It's a pretty neat, nice deal if you ask me. What else do I have? Let's see. Part of concert programs involved short films. So that was one of the things they did is like besides doing like grand concerts, they also had like short films. And so like trying to help pioneer the early film stuff. Movies inspiration for our runtime was because of success of stage version. So the stage version is like longer, and so they thought because of how good the play was, they needed to tell the whole story. So they made it an hour running alongside the stage version. And then it says I have a couple things. It says the Tates family may have owned the rights to the stage play, which that would make sense on why they kind of made it, and it becomes congruent with like Charles Tate directing it, him coming up with the story because of his theatrical experiences, and if he owned the play, it would make sense. And then when I mentioned Sam Cruise earlier and John Ford, both of those guys were in the movie apparently because they uh played it in actors. They were actors who played it on the stage. Yada 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 yada. But yeah, that is literally all the information I have. I've like haven't done much further, research on Ned Kelly himself. I don't really know much of his background, but I thought it was fun to research at least the concept of the story behind this film, this long lost film, the first supposed feature length narrative film, the story of the Kelly Gang, which is pretty awesome, and for it to be based off of a true story too is pretty cool. All the way back more than 100 years ago is unbelievable. And when you think about like lost artifacts or lost treasures, it doesn't have to be these extravagant like gold or jewelry or like I said or like lost bodies of people. It could be things like a lost film or lost poetry or something like that. I think it's awesome that we can continue to talk about it and look back at those times very fondly and just remember history through different lenses. Alrighty, friends, that's really all I have to say about that. Episode 44 done. I appreciate everybody for tuning in as always. If you want to listen to this episode or listen to any of my past episodes or any of my future episodes, I always make sure to upload on YouTube as well as Spotify. If you enjoy anything I say or find anything I say relatable, then I always appreciate a little support. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. You can subscribe to it on Spotify as well. You can also follow me on a few different social medias. I have a Instagram. I also have Facebook, and then I also have a Twitter. I'll make sure to link all those down below in the description, as well as like try to leave them in my channel description, any bio really. But besides the point, I always appreciate the chance to get on the microphone and talk to y'all. And, I'm always trying to figure out new things. And I get a little hesitant sometimes on certain topics, but I feel, some sort of confidence when I know I have a little bit of viewership and it don't take much, sometimes just talking is good for me. But yeah, I love y'all. Don't forget to tell someone else you love them as well. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.